1. The mistake most people make about happiness. Most people think happiness is something they need to achieve. They imagine that once they solve enough problems, reach the right goals, or build the right life, happiness will finally settle in and stay. So they organize everything around that pursuit. They try to become happier, feel better, and eliminate every sign of discomfort. The problem is that this turns happiness into a target. And once happiness becomes a target, life starts feeling like a test. Every day is measured. Every emotion is evaluated. Every bad mood feels like failure. Instead of living, people begin watching themselves live. And that is where the paradox begins. 2. The more you chase it, the more you notice its absence. The direct pursuit of happiness often makes people more miserable because it creates constant self-monitoring. A person starts asking whether they feel good enough, calm enough, fulfilled enough, grateful enough. They begin measuring the quality of every moment. This creates tension. Instead of being present in a conversation, a walk, a meal, or an evening at home, the mind keeps checking whether the experience is working. Is this making me happy? Is this enough? Why don't I feel better? The more attention is placed on happiness itself, the harder it becomes to experience naturally. What should have been a moment becomes an evaluation. 3. Desire never really stops. One of the deepest problems with chasing happiness is that desire rarely comes to rest. A person wants something, works toward it, and believes that once it is finally achieved, peace will follow. But when the goal is reached, the satisfaction usually fades faster than expected. Then a new desire appears, a new standard, a new missing piece, one more improvement, one more milestone, one more thing that seems necessary before life can finally feel complete. This is why so many people keep moving forward but never feel settled. Their life improves, but the mind remains organized around lack. It becomes easier to chase the next thing than to recognize that the habit of chasing itself may be the problem. 4. The trap of I'll be happy when. Many people live inside a quiet sentence they repeat to themselves for years. I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I earn more. I'll be happy when I find love. I'll be happy when I move, heal, improve, or finally become the version of myself I respect. There is nothing wrong with wanting change. The problem is postponing life until some future condition is met. The present becomes a waiting room, and the future becomes the only place where happiness is allowed to exist. But when the future finally arrives, it rarely feels final. The achievement becomes normal, the relief fades, and the mind creates another version of the same promise. 5. Pleasure is not the same thing as happiness. Another reason people get lost is that they confuse happiness with pleasure. Pleasure feels good in the moment. It can come from comfort, food, distraction, attention, entertainment, praise, or novelty. There is nothing wrong with pleasure, but it is brief by nature. The more a person depends on pleasure to feel okay, the more fragile they become. Ordinary boredom starts to feel unbearable. Silence feels empty. Discomfort feels like an emergency. Life becomes a constant search for quick relief, but relief is not the same as peace. Pleasure can interrupt discomfort, but it cannot give direction to a life. A more stable kind of happiness usually depends on deeper things: meaning, character, purpose, closeness, and the ability to remain steady even when life is not especially pleasant. 6. Comparison makes a happiness collapse. Even when life is going reasonably well, comparison can make happiness feel small. A person may be content until they begin measuring their experience against other people's lives. Then everything changes. Someone else looks more successful, more loved, more relaxed, more attractive, more fulfilled. Suddenly, what was enough no longer feels like enough. The problem is that people usually compare their private reality to other people's visible surface. They see outcomes, not inner life. They see images, not anxiety. They see smiles, not confusion. But the comparison still works. It makes happiness feel like a competition. And once happiness becomes competitive, it becomes unstable, because someone always appears to be doing better. 7. Some things cannot be forced. There are certain experiences in life that do not respond well to direct pressure. Sleep is one example. The harder a person tries to force sleep, the more awake they become. Confidence works in a similar way. The more someone tries to control how they appear, the more unnatural they feel. Happiness often works the same way. You can create conditions that support it, but you cannot command it to show up on demand. The moment you try to force it, you create strain, and strain pushes it away. Some of the best things in life happen indirectly. They appear while attention is elsewhere, during meaningful work, a genuine conversation, a quiet walk, or an ordinary moment that was not being tested. 8. A better goal than happiness. The pursuit of happiness becomes less destructive when a person stops making happiness the center of every decision. A better question is not, how can I feel good all the time? But, what kind of life is worth living, even on days that do not feel good? That shift changes everything. Instead of chasing moods, a person starts focusing on what they can actually build: honesty, discipline, courage, meaningful work, good relationships, patience, and self-respect. These things do not guarantee constant happiness. Nothing can. But they create a life with structure and depth. They give a person something more reliable than temporary emotional weather. And very often, happiness appears more naturally in a life that is not constantly demanding it. 9. Happiness is usually a byproduct. One of the strangest truths about happiness is that it often arrives as a side effect. People rarely find it by staring directly at it. They find it while doing something else, while creating, helping, working, learning, connecting, resting, or becoming deeply absorbed in a meaningful task. This matters because many people assume that happiness must be hunted. In reality, it is often something that visits when life has become livable. It grows in spaces where there is attention, purpose, rhythm, and enough inner quiet for a person to stop interrogating every feeling. The moment is not forced. It is allowed, and that makes all the difference. 10. The final paradox. The happiness paradox is simple, but difficult to accept. The more desperately people chase happiness, the more sensitive they become to every moment when it is missing. They measure, compare, postpone, and pressure themselves into disappointment. But when they stop treating happiness as something to capture, life changes. They begin paying more attention to how they live, not just how they feel. They make room for meaning instead of demanding permanent pleasure. They allow sadness, boredom, uncertainty, and imperfection to exist without treating them as proof that life is failing. And then happiness returns in a different form, not as a reward they finally conquered, but as something that quietly appears when the chase ends.